The desert wind carried secrets across El Paso that summer evening in 2009, secrets that would remain buried for 14 years. Olivia Martinez, a 29-year-old sergeant in the National Guard and mother of 2 young children, kissed her daughters goodbye before heading to what she told her family was a mandatory training weekend. She never returned home. The faded yellow house on Tularosa Avenue still stands today, weathered by the harsh Texas sun and the weight of unanswered questions. Inside, Camila Rodriguez, Olivia's now 20-year-old daughter, runs her fingers along the worn spines of family photo albums. The images tell the story of a vibrant woman with warm brown eyes and a determined smile, a woman who vanished without a trace, leaving behind 2 daughters and an investigation that quickly went cold. "Mum always kept her uniform pressed perfectly," Camilla says softly, pointing to a photograph of Olivia in her military dress. "She took such pride in serving. That's why it never made sense that she would just leave." According to police reports filed in June 2009, Olivia's commanding officer confirmed that no training had been scheduled for that weekend. Her car was discovered 3 days later in the parking lot of a small motel on the outskirts of El Paso, keys still in the ignition. Inside the motel room registered under her name, investigators found her military ID and wallet, but no sign of struggle. The prevailing theory quickly became that Olivia had abandoned her family, perhaps crossing into nearby Mexico to start a new life. "They stopped looking," says Miguel Martinez, Olivia's brother, his voice tight with restrained emotion. "The police, the military, they all decided she had just walked away from her responsibilities. But anyone who knew my sister knew that wasn't possible. Those girls were her world." The initial investigation revealed that Olivia had withdrawn $3,000 from her savings account 2 days before her disappearance. This detail, combined with her apparent lie about the training weekend, seemed to support the abandonment theory. The case gradually faded from local headlines, becoming just another unsolved mystery in the border city. But for Camilla and her younger sister Eleanor, now 18, time did not heal the wound of their mother's absence. It merely transformed it into a quiet, persistent ache and a question that shaped their childhoods. What really happened to their mother? Last spring, as Elena prepared to graduate high school, the sisters decided to sort through the boxes of their mother's belongings that had been stored in their Uncle Miguel's garage for over a decade. Among old uniforms and paperwork, they discovered something they'd never seen before: a small, leather-bound diary with a broken lock. "We didn't even know Mom kept a journal," Elena recalls, her eyes distant with memory. "Uncle Miguel said he'd packed up her things from her bedroom after we accepted she wasn't coming back. He never opened the boxes." The diary contained entries spanning the 6 months before Olivia's disappearance. Most were mundane reflections on her daily life, her daughter's school activities, her guard duties, her hopes for their future. But as the sisters read further, they discovered mentions of a name they didn't recognize: Daniel Reeves. "She wrote about him like someone she was afraid of," Camilla explains, her voice dropping. "Not in an obvious way, but reading between the lines, there was fear there, and something else, like she felt trapped." The final entry, dated 2 days before Olivia disappeared, contained a passage that sent chills through her daughters. "I can't keep this secret anymore. What happened at Fort Bliss isn't something I can live with. If anything happens to me, DR knows everything." Fort Bliss, the massive army installation where Olivia had been temporarily assigned for specialized training 3 months before she vanished. The diary mentioned nothing specific about what might have happened there, but the tone of Olivia's writing had shifted dramatically after her return from that assignment. With trembling hands, the sisters took the diary to Detective Anita Garza, one of the few El Paso police officers who had shown genuine interest in their mother's case years earlier. Though retired now, Garza agreed to look at their discovery. "Cold cases are never truly cold," Garza told them, studying the diary's pages with narrowed eyes. Sometimes all it takes is one new piece of evidence to change everything we thought we knew. What began as a painful journey through memories soon transformed into something else entirely. A reopened investigation that would unearth long-buried secrets within the tight-knit military community of Fort Bliss, and a daughter's unwavering determination to discover the truth about her mother's disappearance. The desert winds of El Paso had kept their secrets for 14 years, but the truth, like the persistent desert sand, was finally beginning to surface, one grain at a time. The midday sun beat down on Fort Bliss as Camilla and Eleanor stood at the visitor's gate, the diary clutched tightly in Camilla's hand. Detective Garza had managed to arrange a meeting with Colonel James Harrington, who had been a captain at the base when Olivia disappeared. Now in his 50s, with silver streaking his temples, Harrington greeted them with a professional courtesy that felt rehearsed. "I remember your mother," he said, gesturing for them to sit in his sparse office. A dedicated soldier, her disappearance was unfortunate. Something in his tone made Camilla's skin prickle. She placed the diary on his desk. "We found this," she said simply. "She mentioned something happened here. Something involving someone with the initials DR. The colonel's expression didn't change, but his hand, reaching for the diary, paused momentarily. "I'm not sure what you're hoping to find after all these years," he said, leafing through the pages with studied indifference. The military conducted its own investigation alongside local police. There was nothing to suggest any impropriety. That word, impropriety, hung in the air between them. "Who is Daniel Reeves?" Elena asked directly. Colonel Harrington's eyes flickered up from the diary. "I don't recall anyone by that name." Later, as they walked to their car under the merciless Texas sun, Detective Garza shook her head. "He's lying," she said quietly. "I've interrogated enough people to know when someone's hiding something." What followed was a painstaking process of piecing together fragments of the past. Garza used her connections to access personnel records from Fort Bliss circa 2009. Sure enough, a Captain Daniel Reeves had been stationed there, specifically in charge of a specialized training program that Olivia had participated in. According to these records, Reeves was transferred to Germany just 2 weeks after your mother disappeared, Garza explained, spreading documents across her kitchen table. "That's a fast transfer, even by military standards." The sisters contacted former members of their mother's National Guard unit, most of whom remembered Olivia fondly but claimed to know nothing about her disappearance. However, one former sergeant named Teresa Lujan agreed to meet them at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. "Look," Teresa said, glancing nervously around the nearly empty cafe, "I didn't want to get involved back then, and I don't really want to now. But your mother was my friend." She twisted her coffee cup in her hands. "After that training at Fort Bliss, Olivia changed. She was jumpy, distracted. When I asked what was wrong, she just said some things weren't worth reporting because nobody would believe her anyway." "What did she mean?" Camilla pressed. Teresa's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. "There were rumors about Captain Reeves, about how he treated female soldiers under his command. Nothing official, just whispers." Armed with the diary and Teresa's account, Detective Garza approached her former colleagues at the El Paso Police Department. Initially reluctant to reopen such an old case, they finally agreed when Garza pointed out the inconsistencies in the original investigation, particularly how quickly they'd accepted the abandonment theory despite Olivia's exemplary record as both a soldier and mother. The abandoned car, the withdrawn money, it all seemed to point to her leaving voluntarily, admitted Detective Manuel Ortega, who had been assigned the original case. "But looking back, maybe it was too neat, like someone wanted us to reach that conclusion." A breakthrough came when Elena discovered an old email account of her mother's that was still accessible. Most messages were mundane, but in the weeks before her disappearance, Olivia had emailed herself several documents. Insurance policies, bank account details, and a password-protected file simply labeled insurance. After several attempts, Camilla managed to open the file using her younger sister's birth date as the password. Inside was a single document, a detailed account of what Olivia claimed was systematic harassment and assault by Captain Reeves against female soldiers in his training program. "He said no one would believe us," Olivia had written. "He said we'd lose our careers if we spoke up, but I can't stay silent anymore, not after what I witnessed him do to Private Sanchez." The document indicated that Olivia had been gathering testimony from other women affected, preparing to file a formal complaint with the Judge Advocate General's office. "This changes everything," Detective Garza said gravely. "This isn't about abandonment. This is about silencing a whistleblower." With this new evidence, the investigation gained momentum. Military records revealed that Private Alicia Sanchez had been discharged for conduct unbecoming just days after Olivia mentioned her in the document. Attempts to locate Sanchez initially led nowhere, until a social media post from a women's shelter in Albuquerque mentioned a success story about a former soldier named Alicia who had rebuilt her life after trauma. The desert highway stretched endlessly before them as Camilla, Elena, and Detective Garza made the drive to New Mexico. The mountains loomed in the distance, silent witnesses to the journey that had begun with a weathered diary and a daughter's refusal to accept the easy explanation for her mother's disappearance. "Do you think she's still alive?" Elena asked softly from the back seat, her question almost lost in the hum of the car's engine. Camilla watched the landscape blur outside her window. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "But whatever happened, she deserves the truth to be told." And as they approached Albuquerque, the setting sun cast long shadows across the desert, painting the world in shades of amber and gold. Somewhere in this city was a woman who might hold the key to understanding what really happened to Olivia Martinez, and why a mother who loved her daughters would seemingly vanish without a trace. The Women's Support Center in Albuquerque was housed in a renovated Victorian building, its walls painted a soothing sage green. Inside, Alicia Sanchez, now Alicia Taylor, sat across from them, her hands folded tightly in her lap. At 38, she had the weathered composure of someone who had rebuilt herself from the ground up. "I wondered if someone would eventually come asking," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "When I heard nothing for so many years, I thought maybe she'd just gotten away, started over somewhere." "You knew our mother," Elena said. It wasn't a question. Alicia nodded slowly. "Sergeant Martinez was the only one who believed me, the only one brave enough to do something." The story that unfolded over the next hour painted a disturbing picture of power abused and silence enforced. Captain Daniel Reeves had been responsible for specialized survival training at Fort Bliss, training that often took place in remote areas of the base with small groups of soldiers. "He would isolate the women he targeted," Alicia explained, her professional demeanor momentarily cracking. "Make them dependent on him in training scenarios, then use that power to—" She stopped, took a breath. "Your mother wasn't his target initially. She was too senior, too confident. But she noticed what was happening to some of us younger recruits. According to Alicia, Olivia had begun documenting incidents, gathering statements from women who'd been victimized, building a case methodically and quietly. The day I finally broke down and told her everything, she hugged me and promised it would stop. She said she had enough evidence to file a formal complaint." Alicia's eyes grew distant. 2 days later, I was called to Captain Reeves's office. He had a folder with photos, me at a party during basic training, drinking underage. He said if I mentioned anything about our relationship, he'd have me discharged for conduct unbecoming. When I left his office, your mother was waiting to go in. Alicia wiped a tear. That was the last time I saw her. The next day, I was processed for discharge. I was so ashamed, so afraid. I never questioned what happened to her. I just assumed she'd backed down to protect her career, her family. Detective Garza leaned forward. "Did Olivia ever mention what she would do if her complaint was blocked?" Alicia hesitated. Once, she said she had an insurance policy, that if anything happened to her, the truth would still come out. The revelation sent them back to El Paso with renewed purpose. The insurance file had been just one part of Olivia's protection plan. There had to be more. At the Martinez family home, they combed through everything again. Old photos, documents, seemingly meaningless keepsakes. The breakthrough came from Miguel, who remembered something strange. The week before she disappeared, Olivia asked me to keep her old National Guard footlocker at my house, he said. I assumed it was just storage, but she was very specific that I should keep it no matter what. The footlocker, pushed to the back of Miguel's garage and covered with years of dust, contained uniforms, boots, and a false bottom that concealed a sealed manila envelope and a small voice recorder. Inside the envelope were copies of statements from 6 female soldiers, including Alicia, detailing harassment and assault by Captain Reeves. With the statements was a letter addressed to Brigadier General Catherine Winters at the Pentagon, dated the day before Olivia disappeared. The voice recorder contained a single file, a meeting between Olivia and Captain Reeves in what appeared to be his office. "You think anyone will believe you over me?" Reeves's voice was cold, controlled. "A single mother with financial problems against a decorated officer? I have statements, Daniel, from 6 women, and I've made copies. Statements can be withdrawn. Stories change. People forget. Not this time." Olivia's voice was firm. "This stops now." A long pause followed, then, "Meet me at the Sundown Motel tomorrow night. Bring everything. Maybe we can resolve this privately." The recording ended there. Armed with this evidence, Detective Garza approached the current commanding officer at Fort Bliss and the FBI. The case was no longer about a missing person. It was about potential obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and worse. The investigation that followed moved with surprising speed. Military records showed that while Captain Reeves had indeed been transferred to Germany shortly after Olivia's disappearance, he had requested emergency leave 3 days before his departure. The same weekend, Olivia vanished. Flight manifests confirmed he had returned to El Paso for 48 hours. FBI agents located Reeves, now a civilian defense contractor living in Virginia. When confronted with the evidence, he initially maintained his innocence, but eventually agreed to cooperate in exchange for considerations regarding his sentencing. His confession, delivered in a sterile interrogation room, was as chilling as it was calculated. He admitted to meeting Olivia at the Sundown Motel, intending to intimidate her into silence. When she refused to back down, the confrontation escalated. "I never meant for it to go that far," he claimed, his voice devoid of genuine remorse. "She said she'd already mailed copies of everything to someone high up. I panicked." According to Reeves, Olivia had collapsed during their altercation, hitting her head on the corner of a table. Believing she was dead and his career destroyed, he had driven her body to a remote area of the desert outside El Paso. He provided the coordinates to a location just inside New Mexico state lines. On a cool morning in April 2023, 14 years after she vanished, Olivia Martinez was finally found. The forensic evidence supported Reeves's account of her death, though prosecutors remained skeptical of his claim that it had been unintentional. At the Martinez home, Camilla and Elena sat surrounded by their mother's belongings, her diary, photos, the evidence she had so carefully gathered. The truth had not brought their mother back, but it had restored her legacy. "She wasn't someone who abandoned her children," Camilla said softly. "She was someone who stood up for others, even when it put her at risk." In the wake of the investigation, 3 other women came forward with similar accounts of harassment by Reeves, including a former lieutenant who had been stationed in Germany. The military launched a comprehensive review of harassment complaints at Fort Bliss, dating back to 2008. The diary that had started it all now rested on the mantel in the Martinez home, alongside a photograph of Olivia in her uniform, a reminder not of loss, but of courage. "Mom always told us that the truth matters," Elena reflected, touching the worn leather cover. That standing up for what's right is worth the risk. For the sisters who had grown up shadowed by abandonment, the diary had revealed a different story. One of a mother whose final act had been an attempt to protect others, whose disappearance had been a consequence not of desertion, but of bravery. As the sun set over El Paso, casting long shadows across the desert where Olivia had rested for 14 years, her daughters stood at her proper grave, finally able to say goodbye to the mother they had never stopped searching for, and in finding her, had discovered not just the truth of her disappearance, but the full measure of her courage. If you connected with Olivia's story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. There's another video appearing on your screen right now that delves into a similar journey of truth and justice that I think will resonate with you. Remember, some secrets refuse to stay buried forever, and sometimes the most powerful act of love is simply refusing to stop searching for the truth.